What's your, I hated that person, but they didn't deserve that story. The bully's shadow. When I started my first year of high school, I got picked on bad by this older kid. I never figured out what his problem was with me, but he clearly didn't like me. He was bigger and stronger than I was, and he would shove me around, call me names, and even make fun of anyone who talked to me. Back then, if you told an adult about being bullied, they would just say stuff like, ignore him, and he will stop. That advice did not help at all. Things got so rough I seriously thought about quitting school. I even thought about ending my life because I did not know how to handle it. Then, one morning, I got to school and saw some girls who were friends with that bully crying. Some teachers looked really worried too. When homeroom started, the principal came on the loudspeaker and told everyone that the kid who had been bullying me died in a car accident the night before. He did not deserve to die. I would never think someone should die over bullying, but my life totally changed after he passed away. I finally started making friends. I could walk through the hallways without being scared. I began doing better in school, got accepted into a good college, and now have a solid job in life. Honestly, if that kid had not died, I probably would have dropped out of high school, and there was even a chance I might have taken my own life. My so-called best friend. The girl I called my best friend through high school and most of college was actually my bully. She acted just like how I've heard abusive partners behave. She pushed everyone away from me until I was all alone with her. She put down everything about me. My interests, my achievements, my looks, my clothes, everything. One time, she made me put something in my mouth that she had soaked in her urine. She would throw my stuff out the window and lock me out when I went to get it, and my things would often get broken. For 2 whole years, she took my lunch every single school day. If I did well in class or talked to other people, she would punish me by giving me the silent treatment. When I had surgery once, she said she would come pick me up and help me for 24 hours after the anesthesia wore off. But instead, she left me alone and laughed at how much pain I was in. That was the last straw. I also had a long-term boyfriend who supported me, so I finally cut her out of my life. About 8 years later, I heard her mother had died. The story of how she died was terrible. She called all her kids to tell them she was going to take her own life. All her children lived at least a couple of hours away. One of her sons got there in time to see a small fire. He tried to rescue his mother. She was hiding, and instead of calling for help or putting out the fire, he spent the time trying to find her. He managed to get her out twice, but each time she ran back inside. The fire got out of control, and the son got hurt trying to go back inside when it was no longer safe. My old friend arrived to find the fire trucks there, her brother crying on the lawn, and her childhood home burning. Her mother died in the fire she started herself. The talkative friend. I did not exactly hate him, but I really hated having to talk to him. He was a friend from school. Let's call him Jake. Jake was super social and loved to talk, like nonstop. He was also the son of a wealthy politician. When I say he loved talking, I mean he never stopped. He was in my high school class, and since we lived nearby, we used to walk home together. Man, he was a real chatterbox. I am a depressed introvert on the autism spectrum, and I could barely handle a 10-minute conversation, but Jake would just keep going and going. One time, he followed me all the way to my house and spent hours telling my mom about his future business plans. Like until 5 in the afternoon. We did not even have enough food to feed him, so we had to skip lunch until he finally left. It was terrible. So one day, I just did not want to walk home with him anymore. I made up some excuse about wanting to talk to my crush a little longer until he left. Later that day, I went on Facebook and saw some strange posts on his wall. I asked his best friend what was going on. Jake had been kidnapped. His uncle showed up in a van, picked him up halfway home, told him he was giving him a ride to a family event, and Jake got in without knowing what was really happening. Then, his uncle demanded a huge ransom and kept Jake for a few months. To make sure Jake would not say who took him, the uncle starved him to death and dumped his body on a riverbed. Jake had been morbidly obese before the kidnapping. When they found his body, he was so skinny they barely recognized him. Eventually, 2 of the uncle's henchmen turned themselves in and told the police what happened, but it was too late. I felt guilty for years. Maybe if I had walked home with him that day, this would not have happened. Or maybe the kidnappers would have taken both of us, and I would not be here telling this story. I do not know. All I know is that my choice to avoid him that day might have led to a terrible death for Jake. Now, I protect my friends fiercely. I never say no when someone needs to talk, and I never let anyone walk home alone. I do not believe in God or unconditional family love. But the one thing I know about Jake is this: he did not deserve what happened to him. He was just a lonely guy who wanted to talk. The teacher's outburst. When I was a kid, around 8 or 9 years old, we had a computer teacher who taught us how to type without looking at the keyboard. I was usually pretty quiet, but one day the boy next to me started laughing at a picture on the wall. It was a monkey smiling. Since we were supposed to be good kids and not giggle, that just made us laugh even harder. We could not stop ourselves. The teacher completely lost it. She totally flipped out. We had this book where the teacher would put a mark next to your name if you did something wrong. I had just politely and quietly told her she had gone past my name by mistake, and then she threw the book at me and told me to get out of her classroom. Her face was bright red and veins were popping out on her forehead. I left the room fast and crying. The next year we did not have her anymore, but that moment stuck with me. Teachers never yelled at me like that before. That was the first time in my whole school life I got shouted at like that. One day she stopped coming to school, and by the end of that week we found out she had brain cancer. All my anger toward her disappeared instantly, and I felt terrible. I left that school not long after, so I never found out if she got better or not. Learning mercy. When I was in 7th grade, that's the first year of high school in Australia, I was put into an intermediate class because of my special needs. I have autism, Asperger's, and some behavior quirks that I've since grown out of. Basically, I went to regular classes and hung out with my group during breaks, but an older boy would ride the bus with me, and a special teacher would sit with me in class to make sure I stayed focused. There were about 5 different boys who took turns sitting with me. Most of them were decent guys, but then there was Jay. Jay was not good at all. He was much older, like in his 20s and still in senior year. I later learned he had his own challenges. On the bus, he would physically hold me down in my seat, his arms gripping my sides whenever I got up to stretch. He would yell and swear at me so much that I started walking an hour to and from school on the days he was supposed to ride with me. The other boys told him off and he eventually got detention, but it didn't stop there. Fast forward about 5 years. I had graduated from high school and was going to culinary school in the same town. One day, at my local church during a worship service, we were singing the last hymn when suddenly the back glass door slammed open, scaring everyone. I looked back to see who it was. It was Jay, and he looked terrible. He was wearing shorts and a sweatshirt in the middle of winter. He smelled like urine and vomit, and he was swaying back and forth. He shuffled into the bathroom and threw up loudly. I could hear it from 100 meters away. Later, during supper, he pulled my minister aside to talk. The minister told me Jay had been unemployed since high school, drinking every day, and was about to be kicked out of his home. He was struggling with his issues and wanted to talk to me because he heard I was doing better. I felt torn. Part of me felt sorry for him, and part of me wanted to tell him to go away. After some advice from others, I reached out to him and we started talking. 3 years later, Jay has a steady job as a grocery store cashier and has been sober for a while now. I don't call him a friend yet because I'm still hurt from what happened, but it's getting better. I never really understood mercy until I saw Jay again. Sorry for rambling. The cheater's karma. I once dated a guy who cheated on me. It was not fun at all. After that, it took me a long time before I could fully trust anyone again. Things got a lot worse because he started seeing the girl he cheated with, and their Facebook pages were full of pictures showing them all lovey-dovey and sweet. Since they were both friends with my group of friends, they were always around me, which just made everything harder. I ended up losing a lot of friends because they didn't understand why I was so hurt, and they kept pushing me to hang out with those two. Anyway, the girl he cheated on me with cheated on him. Yeah, shocking, I know. It absolutely destroyed him. He was about to propose to her, had already bought the ring, and found out the day before her birthday, when he planned to pop the question, that she had been sleeping with his brother. On top of that, she had an abortion for a pregnancy that could have been fathered by either brother. It was a complete mess. Honestly, I kind of enjoyed seeing what I thought of as karma, but that was years ago. I'm long over what he did to me. We didn't have a great relationship anyway, and even though he was terrible for cheating, it probably would not have lasted much longer. But she really did a number on him. As far as I know, he hasn't dated anyone since. The whole thing made him really cold. I'm not sorry they broke up, and I'm not sorry he realized how much it hurts to be cheated on. But I do hope he finds someone who makes him happy someday, as long as he treats her right. The class clowns end. Oh man, part of me wanted to keep this to myself, but hey, it's Reddit, so here goes. About 9 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school. My very first boyfriend died unexpectedly just 2 days after our 1-year anniversary. Understandably, I was grieving hard, and there was a lot of pressure on me to keep up with school despite everything. I found a lot of comfort talking to my math teacher. He and his wife had lost a child to sudden infant death syndrome, and a lot of people treated me in ways that were hard to understand, even if they meant well. So here's the story. One day in math class, I got fed up with the typical class clown who kept interrupting the lesson. He was popular, partied all the time, a senior retaking the class, and mostly just a pain. When he was messing around and distracting my favorite math teacher, I told him to shut up, kinda mean honestly, but I cared about the class and he didn't. He sat right in front of me. So he turned around after I told him to be quiet and said, "If I was your boyfriend, I would have killed myself too." My math teacher immediately threw him out of class and told him never to come back. That punishment felt totally deserved. About 2 weeks later, that kid overdosed after a night of partying, mostly OxyContin. That awful comment stuck with me. He really did die. I hated him, but it was still tragic. Now I feel more sympathy than I did back then. At the time, I was bitter, grief-stricken, and honestly kind of a little bitch about it. The last fight. I might be late to the party, but I'm posting this anyway. It's kind of long, but here goes. I had a childhood bully who pretty much made my whole school life miserable. For as long as I can remember, he would tease me, trip me, throw things at me, and more than once, he poured old Gatorade and chew spit into my hair while we were on the bus. He was a popular football player type, kind of an asshole from a middle-class family. My dad tried talking to his mom several times at the bus stop, but she never listened. She would accuse me of causing trouble or even having a crush on her red-haired son. She was basically one of those, I need a manager type moms. One freezing January morning, when there was ice and snow everywhere, he shoved me onto the ground. I fell and scraped my already cold face on the ice in the parking lot. Luckily, his mom and my dad were both there. My dad was talking to her at her car window, but she ignored him. Then I fell right in front of her car. My dad saw it all but didn't move. I finally decided that enough was enough. I was 15, and after being bullied by this jerk for 10 years, I lost it. I left my stuff on the ground and attacked. I sucker punched him in the nose and he dropped. The other kids moved away, and before he could get up, I was on top of him, throwing punches to his face. There was blood everywhere. His mom started screaming and tried to get out of her car, but my dad stood in her way and wouldn't move. She said she was going to call the police. My dad told her to go ahead, but she never did. He looked at her and said, "Either she can do it or I can. And I bet it will hurt a lot more if I do it since I've been trying to talk to you stupid people for 10 years about your inconsiderate kid bullying my daughter." The bus came, but he didn't go to school that day. A few weeks later, he came back, escorted to class by a guidance counselor. 2 weeks after that, with no contact with him, he shot himself. I later found out his family was sexually abusing him, and he needed someone to take his anger out on. Don't get me wrong, I hated him, but I kinda wish he had gotten help. So that's my story. Sorry it was so long. The fireworks blame. Alright, here's a story, not mine, but a friend's. My friend recently moved to Canada, but before that, he grew up in India. At his school there, he and his friends were known as the troublemakers. True to their reputation, one day they decided to set off fireworks in the school bathrooms. They planned it carefully. Right after lunch, when everyone was in class, watched out for teachers, bought the right fireworks, and got ready. The day came, and the explosions went off all over the school right after lunch. Everyone had to evacuate. The principal and the higher-ups knew it was that group of boys, but they had no proof. There were no cameras or anything at that school, so they couldn't catch them. The principal was desperate to find witnesses to tie these boys to the prank so they could punish them and make an example. But this group was really popular, and everyone who was asked said they didn't know who did it. There was another kid at the school who wasn't popular. His dad was a big school sponsor, and he acted really entitled and snobby. Because of that, everyone disliked and ignored him. To try to get noticed and become famous, he went to the principal and confessed to setting off the fireworks. My friend's group was shocked he did that, but didn't try to stop him, thinking they would get away without punishment. The principal had no choice but to expel the kid to make an example and warn others. Even though this kid was disliked, he definitely didn't deserve to be kicked out. The old man and the truck. An old man was driving a huge truck down the road with his blinker on when my pregnant wife pulled out right in front of him. Thankfully, she and the baby survived, but our car was completely wrecked. The man and his truck were fine too. We moved on, struggled to find money for a beat-up used car to replace ours, and tried to adjust to life as a poor couple with a newborn. 6 months later, a man showed up at our door with some papers. It turned out the old man was suing us for $500,000, claiming massive injuries and damage to his truck. It was ridiculous. His lawyer had the same last name as him, and it was clear this old farmer had no retirement savings and couldn't pay medical bills. A family member must have convinced him to cash in on an insurance settlement. This lawsuit dragged us into a terrible mess for over a year. I thought my wife was going to lose her mind. Eventually, our insurance settled the case. The old man got a big payout just for driving his truck with his signal on and almost killing my wife. We tried to forget about him and move on. A few years later, I was reading the newspaper and saw his name again. A drifter had come to the old man's farm asking for work. The man gave him a room and a job for the week. That night, the drifter took a knife from the kitchen and stabbed the old man to death in his bedroom. Then he stole the truck, the same truck that had nearly killed my wife. It was a surreal feeling. We went from hating the old man who had made our lives hell to feeling deep regret and sympathy for him. It was like our hatred somehow brought this tragedy upon him, like we had summoned something terrible. Thinking about it still sends a chill down my spine. The bitter aunt. My great-aunt was terribly verbally abusive to my cousin, especially after she divorced her husband for reasons later found to be exaggerated or outright false. When my cousin was little, she told him that if he wasn't a good boy, Satan would jump out from under his bed and drag him to hell. Because of that, he couldn't sleep in a bed for 20 years. As he got older, he started getting into fights in high school. One day, he came home with a broken nose and a bloody face, and my aunt just looked at him and said, "Well, I hope you learned your lesson," and did nothing else. She would even call the police on him and have him arrested for running away, even though she knew exactly where he was and who he was with. Through all of this, she acted like she was the victim, acted entitled, and was always sad because she felt like she never got what she deserved from people. Years later, after my cousin moved out of his mom's house and in with his dad, my aunt was diagnosed with breast cancer. At first, it wasn't a big deal since her sister and mother had both beaten it without it coming back. But 2 years after chemotherapy and the cancer went away, it came back in a rare and aggressive form. It quickly reached stage 4 and spread to her brain. She started chemotherapy for her breast, but there was nothing doctors could do for her brain. After about a year of fighting, she died. Ironically, by the time she passed, the only part of her body without cancer was the breast where it started. The cancer had spread throughout her body, and she had dementia for the last 6 months of her life. After she died, my cousin and grandmother went through her house and found several journals filled with obsessive records of my cousin's wrongdoings from a very young age. Each entry had detailed dates and punishments. She was truly bitter, obsessive, and abusive. Sometimes it's hard to believe that people like that don't deserve painful deaths, but I think we should hope they live long enough to have a change of heart. AL's story. When I was in my late 20s, I changed careers and worked my way up from the very bottom in a big company. I was older than most of my team and had more experience, so getting along with everyone wasn't a problem, until I met Alton. Al was sharp and technically skilled, a young guy fresh out of school trying to figure things out. But he lacked professionalism and self-awareness. There were complaints about his hygiene. He was too forward with interns. He ran training sessions with his flip-flopped feet on the table, and he had no tact in tough conversations. Our old team manager, Tom, tried to mentor him. Al was the technical lead, but hadn't improved much in other ways. When Tom left, Al and I both interviewed for the manager's job. They decided Al wasn't ready, so I got the promotion. Al agreed to stay on the team. I hoped I could coach him up. After the announcement, Al's attitude changed fast. His sarcasm turned from playful to hurtful, and his work became sloppy and unreliable. By the time I took over, he had basically checked out. When we finally talked, he was icy. He accused me of stealing his job, said I didn't deserve it, predicted I'd fail, and vowed to do everything to make sure I did. After a long pause, I told him I was sorry he felt that way, but I was his boss and wouldn't accept his behavior. It hurt a lot. It crushed me that I wasn't given a chance, especially since we had been on decent terms before. I had even defended him when others mocked his awkward social skills. He was young and smart. I believed in giving him time. After that, we kept it civil. He didn't make my life much harder, but he didn't make it easy either. He rubbed the rest of the team the wrong way, too. 6 months later, he left to pursue his master's degree. We never spoke again. Over time, Al became just a weird work story, a hurdle I overcame. My attitude changed. I thought, screw that guy. He was a jerk. How he acted was really messed up. I even laughed at myself for letting that awkward, exy-smelling, sleazy, mouth-breathing kid get to me. Whatever. He'll get what's coming someday. Fast forward 8 years earlier this year. I'm scrolling on Facebook and see a post from a mutual friend. A memorial referencing something from a year earlier. It was a picture of our friend, with Al, pale, hairless, and frail, holding a newborn baby. His newborn. Shortly after that photo, Al died from a long fight with a terminal illness. He wasn't even 30. I looked into it more. He'd met a sweet woman who worked hard to help with his medical bills. He got worse, then better, and went into remission. They got married. He finished school. They had a few good years. She got pregnant, but he got sicker. He passed less than a year later. I've been close to a few people fading away like Al did. Losing family and friends this way is painful. Nobody should have to watch it, and nobody should have to live it. I'm glad Al got to meet his kid and spend those few good years with someone who loved him. I hope he had fewer bad days than the one we had together.